everyone. I'm Graham Hood and
I'm John Larder.
And it's great to have you on our very first Bullseye program, episode number 1. And we're doing this because there's a definite need for independent journalism. Now, John and I aren't journalists by trade. John, a former paramedic, me, a former pilot. But we're needing to step into the breach because legacy media news organisations are not doing their job. And democracies can't flourish. In fact, democracies cannot exist without a powerful fourth estate or an independent free speech media. And that's what we're doing. We're stepping into the breach, Johnny.
That's exactly right, Hoodie. And we're going to bring you the truth. We're going to bring out the lies that the government and the bureaucracies and people like the pharmaceutical industry are telling you in our Bullseye episode. So we're really looking forward to this.
Yes, reading between the lies. Bullseye reading between the lies. That's what we want to do. We want to give you a fresh perspective. Of course, everybody has the right to make up their own minds about things, and we welcome a guest from both sides of the divide. We're happy to interview anybody that can bring about some kind of understanding that we can make better informed choices in our lives. And that's what Bullseye is all about. We thank you for your support with Club Grubbery. That will continue to go. And we'll continue to move along with Club Grubbery as well. But the Bullseye program looks like being a once-a-week operation that will bring you the best guests we can find you from all around the world. So with that said, let's go to our first panel discussion. And boy, do we have a powerful panel for you right now. Firstly, joining us from Washington, D.C., we have Senator Ron Johnson, who is a Republican senator from the fine state of Wisconsin and a valiant fighter in the issues that we'll be discussing tonight. Welcome, Senator Johnson.
Thanks for having me on.
We also have from South Australia, Liberal Senator Alex Antic, also been very active in the issues that we've been discussing and that we'll be talking about tonight from South Australia. Welcome, Senator.
Yeah, thanks, Woody. Thanks for having me.
And from the fine state of New South Wales, we have John Ruddick, MLC for the Government of New South Wales. We thank you for joining us, John.
Good to see you, Hoodie.
We're about to roll a video, gentlemen, that was screened on one of our major networks just in the last few days relating to health issues that we're seeing in Australia. We'll roll that video now and we'll come back to you for some discussion.
More young Australians are being diagnosed with cancers once thought to affect mostly older people. Doctors say environmental factors may be to blame, as one woman bravely shares her story, hoping to spark change.
This is what chemotherapy looks like, one of the most powerful treatments to kill cancer, being given here to a 35-year-old woman.
Jessica, are you scared right now? Terrified. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't, to battle this cancer.
A rare form of ovarian cancer, but the process to get to this treatment was painful.
I approached a few doctors who told me that I was too young for cancer, that it was something that was generally considered more in older people. I got told that it could be a stomach ulcer.
It wasn't until being admitted to hospital a year later that doctors found a 13-kilogram tumour the size of a watermelon.
They removed the tumour along with my right ovary and my right fallopian tube. Now, from that, they obviously did testing, which determined that I have an exceptionally rare cancer.
She's sharing her story, hoping other young Australians, particularly women, will speak up.
Hear us, really hear what we're saying and, push for further testing, because that could be the difference between being diagnosed in stage 1 or stage 3 and 4.
Jessica's story is becoming more common. Cancer rates are increasing in young Australians. Ovarian cancer is up 30%, breast cancer 50%, and bowel cancer 71%. Increases also in prostate, pancreatic and liver cancer.
We think that there's a big impact from environmental factors, be it what people are eating, people smoking, what people are drinking, the amount of exercise they're doing.
More research is needed. For now, Jessica knows what she has to do.
Ovarian cancer picked a fight with the wrong woman.
A fight she says she won't lose. Jennifer Beshwati, 7 News.
Well, there we have it. Senator Johnson, you and I met in person about a month ago in Washington at the Senate hearings that you were conducting, remarkably into the links between the mRNA technology and an increase in rapid and aggressive cancers. We were there with Dr. Asim Malhotra, Professor Angus Dalgleish and others. How does that video make you feel when you watch it now?
It's galling to listen to the fact they never even mention what is probably the most obvious potential cause, which is the mRNA injection. What else has changed? I mean, the environment hasn't changed dramatically. What people eat, what people drink, how people exercise hasn't changed dramatically. What's changed dramatically is in 2021, these injections, which we know cause, serious adverse events, including sudden death, but we are in a global state of denial, and that's just proof positive of that. We had our hearing, plausible mechanisms. Dr. El-Deary, who's been, tormented as a, respected oncologist because he came out with that paper. But then the Democrat witness, also highly respected oncologist, said, but there's no proof. There's no proof that those shots cause cancer. But of course, she didn't have any idea what those shots actually contained, what they were made up, and how they actually made. It was literally shocking. She was completely ignorant of it. But no, this is it's depressing to watch a news report like that, and the fact that they don't even mention what is probably the most obvious cause of this significant and unexpected increase in cancers in Australia.
Well, Dr. Graylow, who was representing the other side in that hearing that I attended, was actually promoting the mRNA technology as a cure for cancer, which was flabbergasting as everyone looked on. You've published a report called Unmasked. If you had an opportunity in the next couple of minutes to tell the Australian audience what that's about, please go ahead.
Sure. What my staff uncovered in an 11 million page document dump from Bobby Kennedy, finally got his staff to give us that information, is on March 1st of 2021. This is less than 3 months after the emergency use authorization for both the Pfizer and Moderna mRNA injections. Peter Marks, the head of the group in FDA that approves vaccines and then is supposed to surveil for safety, was warned that the algorithm they were using to analyze the vaccine adverse event reporting system, VAERS, was going to hide and mask safety signals. 26 days later, using a different algorithm, senior FDA officials were shown 26 safety signals, including sudden cardiac death, pulmonary infarction, Bell's palsy, different types of strokes. For 3 consecutive months, they kept doing data runs showing more serious adverse events. They were screaming at them safety signals. They didn't acknowledge them. They shunted the person off the side. They told her to cease and desist. She was a pest. And they continued to use the algorithm that they knew were masking and hiding these safety signals. And to this day, they continue to deny it. They continue to not tell the American public, the global public, the truth.
Senator Johnson, welcome to the program. Can I just ask you this? Our governments relied heavily on the advice of the FDA, the CDC. In fact, we've now even started our own CDC. What would be your advice to Australians now in relation to that advice, what you've uncovered, and what should we be asking now? What do we need to be asking our governments about that advice?
First of all, read my 38-page report. We have the documents. We have the proof. Do not believe what the CDC and FDA has told you. Don't believe your own government, quite honestly, because they're all complicit in it. What is shocking about what I consider the greatest scandal of government in my lifetime, when we revealed that on April 29th, not one major news outlet, not one major newspaper has covered that as a news story. I've been interviewed on Fox News, Fox Business, these types of podcasts, but it's never been covered other than, I think the Epic Times is probably the only newspaper that it covered as a news story. Otherwise, the mainstream media, who are complicit in all of this, our federal health agencies, big pharma, big media, globally, is complicit in pushing these injections, this experimental therapy on the public, so nobody will admit that they're wrong. They simply will not admit. They're doubling down. So no, it's actually unbelievable to me that here almost 3 months later, 2.5 months after we issued that report, that bombshell, it's not ever been reported as news.
Senator Antic, you've been fighting this fight in the Federal Senate of Australia in Canberra ever since it started. I'm sure you must have some questions for Senator Johnson while we have him on.
Well, I mean, I've been watching the hearings, Hoodie, from afar and watching them with great interest. Watching them, I think, with a little bit of interest in terms of our own, battle for information. There were a lot of people in the fight 2 or 3 years ago. There's not as many of us now, I have to say, sadly. But the fight goes on. I mean, we've been pushing for just the basic documentation for a long period of time. I mean, the experience that Senator Johnson relates with the lack of media coverage is, very familiar to us here in Australia. We have a very different media landscape when it comes to the advertising of therapeutic goods here in Australia. Of course, the media is not allowed to advertise prescription medicines, but it can advertise complementary medicines. And so, there is an absolutely undeniable flow of money, advertising revenue from big pharma companies into the Australian media still. And I think the observation about why it is that it's taken so long, it all just sounds very familiar on a similar lesser scale, I suppose, here in Australia. But look, one of the things that I'm interested in terms of the American experience is the correlation between some of the other instances we've seen, like the tobacco companies really never ever admitted liability for their products, and I'm just wondering whether or not Senator Johnson sees any light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, it must be very frustrating having argued about this, fought for these documents, and now finally compiled this entire report, which is excellent. Is there any hope, do you think, that we'll ever see see the truth come out here?
Well, the truth is out. More people's eyes are being opened. I don't know if the experience is in Australia, but the mandates are off in America here, and the uptake of the mRNA boosters is extremely small. Only the true pro-vaxxers are still getting boosted. I fear the damage is done. But we like New Zealand, we're the only other country that allows big pharma to advertise prescription drugs on TV. They're awful advertisements. If you actually listen to them, there's no way you'd ever take that drug. You don't know what they're for. The side effects are horrendous. The only reason they spend billions is to buy the narrative. And that's what became so apparent during COVID, is they capture the narrative. They still have it, which is why none of these news media outlets are covering what again is just a bombshell revelation about what the FDA knew, what our federal health agencies knew, and what they refused to tell the global public.
John Ruddick, any questions for Senator Johnson?
Well, look, in New South Wales, which is Australia's largest of our 6 states, Senator Johnson, the official figures say that 98% of people, kids and adults, took at least 2 of these mRNA vaccines, or COVID vaccines. So I've been asking the top health bureaucrat in the state. I said, okay, well, look, 2% didn't. Do we have any curiosity on how those 2% are faring? I mean, because when I usually ask people who didn't take the vaccine, I said, it's a surprise you didn't die of COVID. So and they all laugh, okay, because they got COVID and they somehow survived. But I guess my question, Senator Johnson, is, so I've read part of your report, and you're saying that early on, like often a lot of the deaths would happen in the first 48 hours. But am I right in thinking we're now a few years on from it, and most people are still not taking COVID boosters? Okay, yes, some idiots are. But if you just sort of took the 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years ago, and you haven't had adverse side effects, which is most people, thank God, is it fair to say now that the risk of harm has sort of moved through the system, and we've moved on, so people today who have taken the shots can feel reasonably confident? Or are we seeing signs that there's going to be, years later, an uptick in the cancers and other bad side effects for health?
Well, of course, sudden cardiac death, that can occur very rapidly. Cancers takes quite some time to develop. So I think that's the concern long term. We certainly noticed, I wrote letters, didn't get an adequate response from CDC in terms of hot lots. And it did appear that a very small percentage of the lots of both Moderna and Pfizer were creating the vast majority, 8% plus of the serious adverse events. I can't really explain that. I think there is obviously manufacturing differences, just storage differences. You remember you had to store this at minus 90 some degrees Fahrenheit. If that wasn't followed, I think the mRNA probably degraded. So you probably got a less potent boost, which was probably helpful from a standpoint of adverse events. So the problem is there's no curiosity. The other problem is, and we're starting to interview some of these health officials, we have now found out that they destroyed their records on the advice of counsel from HHS. We have a Federal Records Act. You should not be allowed to destroy federal records. And yet, the attorneys within these federal health agencies kind of selected people. Oh, no, you can destroy records. So it's like, a lot of the evidence isn't there. Now, they couldn't destroy all of them, which is what allowed us to assemble this report. We'll continue to do these interviews. But I tell you, the people we're interviewing are completely unrepentant. There's no evidence you can show them, even though prior to COVID, on VAERS, there was about 40 to 50,000 adverse events reported per year prior to COVID, before those injections. The year of the injections, it's almost 1 million. And we asked them, well, didn't that concern you? Well, yeah, it concerned you, but that's not a safety signal. That doesn't prove anything, just like that oncologist. There's no proof that these mRNA injections cause cancer. Well, there's no proof if you don't look for it, if you're not curious, or even worse, if you do not want to see proof. Like Peter Marks, these CMF officials, they were shown safety signals. They just closed their eyes. And they simply wouldn't admit to it. They're not admitting to it to this day.
But Senator Johnson, we couldn't ask for a better health secretary in the United States, Senator Kennedy, who's been keeping an eye on Big Pharma for decades. We've got President Trump. We've got a Republican majority in the Senate. So from the other side of the world, and some, as people, all the participants here, have felt very passionately about this whole issue, we are a little bit sort of wondering, and we're 18 months into the Trump second term, we're wondering, we're not seeing enough. I mean, you're putting out your reports, but I mean, why aren't we, if we've got the power in Washington, why aren't we sort of seeing more action on this?
Well, because you still have the people inside these agencies that approve these things that were supposed to be doing safety surveillance. They're not going to admit they're wrong. They're digging in. They're destroying their records. President Trump, I mean, listen, I'm a big supporter. He's doing things that nobody else would do. I would say this is a blind spot. He's proud of Operation Warp Speed, which, by the way, I was supportive of as well. We had to end this pandemic. But then my eyes were open talking to Michael Yeadon about what this injection really was. It's not traditional vaccine. It's gene therapy. There's no way I was ever going to get that injection. But President Trump would like to take credit for saving tens of millions of lives. You have all these wild estimates in terms of how many lives are saved while people are denying the vaccine injuries. So you have a problem institutionally. Whether it's Big Pharma, whether it's the media, they're all complicit. Most of my colleagues probably cut videos. Get that jab, end the pandemic, right? I mean, everybody was on board. Virtually everybody was on board. So whether you're a doctor, whether you're a federal health official, whether you're a member of Congress, whether you're the President of the United States, if you encourage people to get the jab, you don't want to face the reality that encouragement, that mandate, that coercion killed people. Permanently maimed people. You just don't want to admit it, and they're not admitting it. And in fact, they're doubling, tripling, quadrupling down. They're approving mRNA for flu shots. And by the way, it's not crazy mRNA was really designed for cancer. Where you have no other hope, more self-directed. The reason it was never used is they couldn't control where it went. It biodistributed all over the body. And they knew that, and they lied to the American people it was going to stay in the arm. It accumulated in the ovaries. That woman that on that clip had ovarian cancer. It's the first thing that went through my mind. So again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical researcher. It was obvious to me the danger here. It was obvious to me I wouldn't take that shot. It's still obvious to me how it could create these harms. But again, we get these. The president of an oncology society comes in, doesn't know anything about the mRNA, and she's testifying that it doesn't cause cancer. Again, the state of denial is just jaw-dropping.
Senator Johnson, we talk about the deaths, and the thing that's alarming to us and probably not to the public yet is the deaths in the paediatric section. Young children that are dying unnecessarily from these vaccines. They're being encouraged to have all these additional ones as well. Senator Antic has been trying to get information in the Australian Parliament about the paediatric deaths that have occurred. What have you uncovered in your inquiries in the US?
Well, this I give Dr. Prasad and Tracy Beth Hogue a lot of credit. When they got in there into this administration, they were looking at what FDA studied of about 96 child deaths. And FDA, under the Biden administration, pretty well hid that. Dr. Prasad exposed it. The same people that covered it up have kind of rewritten reports. We're trying to get the different iterations to kind of prove how they continue to water that down. But the bottom line is, even trying to water it down, our FDA has admitted that children probably died from the jab. Again, don't know how many. Again, these are only the 96 reported to VAERS. How many were unreported? We have a study commissioned by the CDC at Harvard, the Pilgrim study, showed about 1% of adverse events are actually reported to VAERS. That's a significant underreporting rate. Globally, I think we have more than 39,000 deaths reported associated with the COVID injections. 24% of those are occurring on the day of injection within 1 or 2 days. And they always say, well, VAERS doesn't prove causation, but that's correlation. I know if I had a loved one that's perfectly healthy, went in and got the jab, died the next day, I know what I would blame.
Exactly right. And Senator, we've also seen the release of a very powerful document from Tulsi Gabbard, who is the Director of National Intelligence in the US, who sadly has to retire or resign because of illness in her family. But that document was damning about the origins of the so-called pandemic, the virus. We're wondering whether that's going to take on any traction as well. And in line with that and the stuff that you're revealing, are you getting the collegiate support that you would like? Are many of your colleagues on station with you, or are you just fighting this battle on your own?
Well, in addition to ignoring my bombshell report, they also ignored a hearing that Rand Paul had with a CIA whistleblower that was working for Tulsi Gabbard, trying to implement an executive order, trying to declassify a lot of this information, including the origin story. They were surveilled and sabotaged by the CIA. That was not reported as newsworthy. And then Tulsi Gabbard, on her last day, revealed, how Anthony Fauci definitely lied again to Congress when he said, I wasn't involved in the intelligence assessment of the origins of COVID. No, he put all the people in. He planted his the people he was giving grants to that changed their opinion that it was man-made to natural, sprang from nature origin. He put those people in the CIA assessment. So again, this is simply not being reported. Now, Chairman Paul is going to has subpoenaed Anthony Fauci. He's going to be coming in and testifying for our committee. I'll be on that committee on, I think, July 29th. He has a pardon. He shouldn't be able to claim the fifth against self-incrimination. It'll be very interesting to ask him, what he knew, when he knew it, and really hold him up to scrutiny.
Is there any way that pardon can be challenged, or is it just inviolate?
Good question.
Well, federal pardons are only applicable to federal law. So there is possibility that some state could, potentially prosecute. Again, there's a question about, was Biden even aware of these pardons? Was this the auto pen? Was it simply, again, that would have to play out our courts. To me, the first part and the most important part of accountability is total exposure. And we're still trying to get all the devices of Anthony Fauci from the agencies. They're still wrapped up in the legal process. So we don't have full disclosure of even all of his documents before the hearing.
Senator Antic, it's clear that if we link the origins of the virus, and then we link up with the strategies that went on after that. Now, I think we need to acknowledge that as a logistical exercise, Operation Warp Speed was a success. I mean, they did get the material out there that they needed to get there in a record time, and they covered a vast continent, if you like. But we have a situation where the stuff that they were transporting was, of course, much more dangerous than we were taught. Have you got any further questions you'd like to ask Senator Johnson?
Oh, look, I think there are so many, but I guess the interesting thing is the difference in something in many ways in the social media environment in the United States. There's been so much commentary, and I think in politics here in Australia we see the difference between understanding about a range of issues in politics based on where people are getting their news from. I think in Australian politics there's still a huge import on the traditional media, and there would be only a handful that were taking things on social media seriously. But in the United States, that's a different landscape. It looks to me there's a lot of different, more active podcasts and a lot of more active people on social media. But still, the mainstream media is so critical. But I guess Senator, do you see any sort of? I mean, are there any kind of tips, I suppose, for the Australian? Getting that message out. I mean, it's obviously been difficult to get a message out that's not mainstream in the United States, but here in Australia we have so many limited. I mean, these guys, Hoody and John, do a great job, but it's very difficult to get a message out there. Are there any tips for the Australian? Because that's one of the things I've had. Even when we get results, it's very hard to get eyeballs on them, as they would say.
Well, I know we talk funny to your ears, and vice versa, but we speak the same language. So I would just recommend that Australians tap into American social media, and there are some pretty influential podcasters who are on top of this. People like Joe Rogan who have been questioning this. Brett Weinstein. I mean, some very respected individuals, and then of course you've got the Peter McCullochs, and there's a number of people that are respected, which is why in America the uptake of these boosters is way down. So we do have freedom of speech. Credit Elon Musk for saving X as a platform for free speech. Without that, I don't think this would be as successful. I think they would have been able to crush the free speech in terms of this whole the COVID injection and just the miserably failed response to COVID across the board. The loss of freedom. I was shocked by some of the videos, some of the reports out of Australia. I truly was. My heart was breaking for what your society went through and how onerous and how they were crushing freedom across. I mean, at a northern border, what the Canadians did. I love our English-speaking brethren, from the UK and from Canada and from the UK and New Zealand. And it was sad to see that as much freedom-crushing activity was occurring in America, it was even worse in things like, it appeared to be worse in Australia and in Canada and elsewhere.
John Ruddick, we've still got a chief health officer in New South Wales that's holding fast on all this nonsense. I mean, what would you ask Senator Johnson about in relation to that? The madness just continues, doesn't it?
Well, I'd be interested to know, most of my life, the only people on the political spectrum that were skeptical of Big Pharma were the left. Now, one of the other things that changed with COVID is that the skeptical elements of the left towards Big Pharma seems to have completely disappeared, at least in this country. So we have a party in this country, Senator Johnson's, called the Greens, and they're sort of like a pretty seriously left-wing party. And they used to be, questioning Big Pharma, big profits and all that. They don't like it because they're communists, basically. But now they have sort of, like in Australia at least, there is the only people who are skeptical of Big Pharma in Australia today are shows like this on the right. So in Washington, do you have any colleagues from the Democrats who are privately telling you that they're sympathetic to what you're doing? Or even better, are any of them actually speaking out, or is it like Australia where they don't exist anymore? The left is sceptical of Big Pharma.
No, it's a very strange political dynamic. I entered politics from the private sector in 2010 as part of the Tea Party. Yep. And one of the things I said is, I defended Big Pharma and Big Oil. So, what am I the only guy that likes a gas station in every corner that wants a new drug? So, I come from the private sector. And so I was supportive of Big Pharma. But then COVID opened up my eyes. And I think what has happened is the capture of these agencies across the board, big business capturing the big agencies. And of course, the left is all about big government. And so all of a sudden, when you have the capture, when you have the merging of big industry and big government to control the population, that's something the left supports. And of course, that's what the right abhors. And so it's been a total switch. And this occurred in a period of about 16 years. It's really, it's a political phenomenon, quite honestly. But no, my ranking member is of the left, Richard Blumenthal. He's bringing all these people, refuting what I'm saying, holding press conferences before a hearing I had on the voices of the vaccine injured, finally giving parents whose children perfectly normal get a vaccine, never speak to them again. Wouldn't even listen to them. Had a press conference and told the media, I hope nobody covers this hearing. There's nothing credible about this hearing. What a blow to parents who had to deal with just seriously damaged children from what they know is the vaccine injury. So no, it's a very unusual, but really 180-degree political realignment here between right and left, and tying up with pharma. But that's because pharma is now tied at the hip with big government.
And you mentioned before about Australia having a particularly bad reaction to COVID, and you're entirely correct. What you saw in the media is not overstating it. And it was also, as you said, Canada and New Zealand, and it was Northern Europe and England and the United States, which sort of went really crazy about this. In fact, I see a direct correlation between countries that got the most brainwashed by the global warming scam. There's a direct correlation. They were also exactly the same countries that got the most brainwashed by the COVID scam. So, Senator Johnson, do you think that correlation is a coincidence, or do you think that there's some type of link there, that the type of people who fall for one scam are more likely to fall for this other scam as well?
It's a total link. I mean, that is what big government does. They create fear. Fear is a very powerful motivator. So if they can scare the you-know-what out of people and then have the solution, they can control their life. And so that happened, obviously, with climate change. It's happened with the COVID. Now they're talking about hantavirus. They're talking about Ebola. They're just spoiling they're doing everything they possibly can to whip up fear, because they're going to have a solution, right? That is why they're pushing the mRNA. It's such a profitable platform. You can cook up a supposed vaccine and gene therapy designed specifically for whatever new pathogen that they're creating. I mean, that's what we can't miss in this whole process is Anthony Fauci, part of those disclosures, was funding all this gain of funding research. 120 biolabs around the world, 40 of them alone in Ukraine. What in the world is the United States government funding dangerous bio research? Of course, they're circumventing the bioweapons treaties by saying, well, we're just producing countermeasures. Well, in order to produce a countermeasure, you have to create these Frankenstein viruses. I mean, this is insane what they're doing. That's why they have to be exposed. That's why they have to be held accountable.
Senator, I spent 2 hours last night watching a documentary series by James Corbett from the Corbett Report on Bill Gates, the life of Bill Gates. It was a true eye-opener. Clearly, everything that he and his cronies are doing are geared to a certain narrative, and that narrative is blatantly obvious. It's all about eugenics and population control. What are your personal views, given what you've understood, as the main agenda that's driving this from a global perspective?
It is control of the population. And I think Bill Gates, if everything were to be exposed, and I don't know everything, but I suspect, I think he's going to go down in history as a very bad person, as will Anthony Fauci, or they certainly should. I mean, how many millions or possibly billions did Bill Gates make off his investment in BioNTech? Pushing these things, holding Event 201, messing around with mosquitoes and, all these things, ticks. Again, we simply don't know, because when President Trump issues an executive order to declassify this stuff and make the American public aware of what government's been doing, our own CIA sabotages the effort of disclosure. So again, in America, we have a very deep state. I'm sure you have the same thing in these other countries as well. Government does not give up its secrets. You have people in these agencies that do not believe that they are accountable to the public. They're accountable to their agency. They cover for their agencies, and we're seeing that time and time and time again. Name the scandal, from JFK assassination to today, MK Ultra, all these things. I mean, we have been lied to so many times by our governments, and then yet we're surprised when they lie to us again. But no, I think this is the game plan of big government. Create fear so you can control the population. And again, it's foreign to a conservative mind, right? I have enough issues trying to control my own life and my family. Okay.
Yeah.
Why would I want to mess with somebody else's life? I'm all for freedom, but these people aren't. The radical left are not.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I can't believe that we're having these conversations. I would never have thought that we would be even 5 years ago. Senator, we know we've got to let you go. I just want to thank you on behalf of everyone watching. You've been a powerful contributor to our program, the Club Grubbery program, over the last couple of years. And we just wish you well, sir, and we thank you so much for your time.
Well, I appreciate what all of you are trying to do to, uncover and expose the truth. God bless all of you. Take care.
God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Senator.
Well, gentlemen, there you have it. Alex Antic, any insights gleaned there? I mean, I know you've been over the top of this for several years now. What's your take on what you just heard?
Well, I mean, look, I think it's an important time in US politics hearing these these hearings, I should say. They've got a lot of work to do, obviously, in terms of the whole thing. I mean, it's incredible here in Australia, just using the Australian example, that we just cannot get any sort of genuine hearing ourselves into the whole any aspect of COVID, really. I mean, in any other world where you had such a 3 years of such a terrible, life-changing period on any measure. I mean, the whole COVID experience was, I don't know too many people that liked it. And we still can't get a royal commission into what happened. We still can't get answers in relation to all aspects, any aspects of it, really. It sort of tells the story. So I mean, from my point of view, people often say, well, that was a long time ago. Why are you still beating the drum on this? And the answer is because there are still questions left unanswered. There are still people that are suffering on a range of levels, right? It's not just health related things. It's also people that still had businesses that were damaged and destroyed, and the impact on Australian society was so enormous that that's what drives me to keep asking questions about all of this. We don't always have the answers. We're not always right, by the way. I mean, we've made a lot of assertions over the course, or implications, and we don't really know, but that's why we keep asking the questions. So, I mean, a lot of the questions that have been put today are just things that we can only surmise, we can only question. We just don't have the answers. So that's the key. I mean, I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going to continue to ask those questions in our Senate estimates processes, and continue to push for hearings. I mean, we've tried everything in this country, not just me, but others. We've many moons ago, we asked simply for the contracts. You would think the contracts for supply of these goods would be the sort of thing that the Australian public should have access to, but that was denied. We've sought information on all sorts of things. Current excess death rates, that keeps getting knocked back, and the response is always the same. That is, this is just a fishing exercise, etc., etc. So I think what Senator Johnson said about there being lack of inquisitiveness is the thing that's most telling. I mean, there haven't been enough questions asked and enough answers given.
Mm. I think too, Hoodie, just on that question, I mean, the Senator certainly raised the issue around a clear and present danger going forward. I mean, here we are talking about 40 labs in the Ukraine. I mean, there's bird flu, there's all these other things that are just popping up. We see that Jane Holton re-emerge in the media in the last week. So they are planning more vaccines, and at the end of the day, we know that these vaccines are deadly. So that in itself is a problem going forward, is it not?
Well, I mean, once again, I mean, I think, look, this doesn't just relate to the COVID era. I mean, I've been asking questions about the routine childhood schedule as well. I mean, genuinely, without any implication or without any accusation, but simply just asking the questions like, what are the testing that's done? What is the testing that's done? Do you do placebo-controlled tests on these products? Have we done them? Have they been done? And, the pushback is incredible. I mean, there just does not seem to be a willingness to answer these questions. So, and that is always the problem, is that we can make all the assertions about, any of these topics that we like, but until there's hard and fast proof, it's very easy to duck and weave around it. And I don't know. I don't know if the general public have got an appetite to revisit this. Some people do, obviously. Some people who've been affected do. But for the greater part, it feels like people want to move on still. So, we just have to keep asking the questions.
John Ruddick, the whole notion of people moving on, it just seems to me like we're leaving our wounded on the battlefield. And that's, to me, has never been the Australian way. We live in a 50-year apology cycle that we've been talking about a lot lately, the thalidomide apology, the stolen generation. We're sick and tired of the system waiting until the survivors and the perpetrators are dead or nearly dead, where no action can be taken either way to support or prosecute. We're sick of this. We need remedy now. We're looking at the victims of the infected blood scandal, which rages on and on. People are taking their own lives still because they've never been recognised. They've never been properly compensated. There's never been a Royal Commission. Even the Human Rights Commission just recently denied an application to hear their claims and prosecute those to the next level. Now it's got to go to the federal court. I mean, are we stuck in this 50-year apology cycle, or do we need remedy now?
During COVID, I remember thinking, in 20 or 30 years from now, places like the ABC and SBS will do a documentary about the COVID era. And they'll sort of say, wow, that was really weird. And because all the people will have moved on and, financial incentives would have removed, when people can look at it, they'll say, yeah, well, that was all pretty crazy. But, the interesting thing I found out listening to Senator Johnson was, this thing about Dr. Fauci, they used to have gain of function research in the United States. Okay, where they get the little flu virus or some other virus, right? And they just experiment with it. Say, look, if we make it a little bit more difficult that way, or a little bit more potent, what does it do? And what do we do? Okay, so very dangerous stuff. And Obama said, no, you can't do that anymore in Australia and America. Okay, good. So then we now know that Dr. Fauci then took his little project out to outback China, Wuhan. Gee, what could go wrong there? Now, when you speak to people who are curious about why we resisted COVID and have got an open mind on it, I don't tell them that story if they're just a beginner to awakening up about COVID, because it just seems so crazy. It just people think, oh, that couldn't be true. It could not be true. Yes, mate, they agree that maybe Dr. Fauci was a bit of a baddie and that he exaggerated the vaccine and everything else, but they just couldn't believe that he was actually the one. Not only was he wrong about everything to do with COVID, he started bloody COVID. And so it was interesting to hear Senator Johnson, absolutely emphatic that is what happened. And, you're talking about moving on. In my maiden speech in this little place, I said, some want to move on from COVID, but I don't and I won't. And we had a motion up recently, probably 6 months ago, calling for the resignation of Kerry Chan. Now, every other chief health officer out there has found a way to move on, like professionally, get into another job. I don't know how to, I fully understand why they'd want to move on. They can't sleep at night. But so even the federal chief health officer moved on, wants to spend more time with the family. One of them became the governor of Queensland, I think. But Kerry Chan, she's not going anywhere. So I put up a motion in the Parliament to debate, whether she should resign, and no appetite there. They don't. The funny thing is, Liberal, Labor, they do not want to talk about it. Now, it was a Liberal government that inflicted all the COVID mania on us here in New South Wales. So you'd think Labor would think, oh, well, let's make a little bit of political hay against them. They gave us all this debt. They locked us all down for nothing. And you'd think but no, Labor absolutely doesn't want to make any mileage out of this. Liberals don't want to bring it up. So I've spoken to people. I said, look, shouldn't we have an inquiry? They won't agree to a Royal Commission. Let's have an inquiry into COVID mania. Absolutely no interest. But we're not going to give up on that. So hopefully we'll have a few other new members of the upper house here after next March, and we'll be able to get something through. We do have a bill coming up shortly about the, they've got this no jab, no play thing. So you can't go to childcare unless you're taking the jab in New South Wales. Thanks, Liberal Party, not you, Senator Antic. We all love you, Senator Antic, big time. Because people admire people who speak out when it took guts, and it took guts for you and Craig Kelly, Matt Canavan, and a couple of others. But we're putting up this bill to say, what used to be the case before the Liberals changed it was if you're in New South Wales and you could just sign a box saying that you're a conscientious objector to the vaccines. And you might be a Jehovah's Witness, you might be a Mormon, you might be a Muslim, you might be a health freak, you might be whatever, okay? Someone who's never taken a vaccine in their life. And you just didn't want to have it. So you just had to tick this box. Now, that was to sort of stop the people who wanted to get their kids vaxxed, rightly or wrongly, but just didn't get around to it. Okay, so this was sort of to kick those sheep along in the right direction. But there were conscientious objectives. Now, good people. Prior to COVID, I'd never met anybody who was an anti-vaxxer. I'd sort of heard about them, but I didn't know quite what they were. And I didn't know where they were coming from. But I was curious, even though we weren't allowed to talk about them. And then during COVID, during the anti-lockdown marches, etc., which were some of the funnest days in my life, I would meet these people who would say, look, I haven't taken the COVID vax. I haven't taken one vax in my life. Okay. And all these people had something in common. Unbelievable health. They just looked really, really healthy. And I was like, okay, well, something's going on here. So we're going to hopefully have this in, we're going to have this debate on this no jab, no play thing. Now, we can get bills occasionally through this upper house. We've got a uranium mining bill up through the upper house recently, but it's not easy. But we've got zero hope without either one of the major parties supporting us. And at this stage, we don't have that. So let's hope there's a change in the personnel in the parliament after the coming election, and we can start to make progress on this, because not only are we not going to give up on the call for a COVID Royal Commission, I enjoy talking about it, okay, because we got the facts on our side, and I enjoy embarrassing the politicians and the senior bureaucrats.
Johnny, before... Sorry.
I was just going to say, John, good on you for doing that. No offence taken, of course, from this little black duck, as they say. It was, in fact, a Liberal government that did that. It was a Liberal government at federal level that enacted the Commonwealth no jab, no pay legislation, PAY. So the states, as you rightly point out, have the no jab, no play, which relates to childcare, and the Commonwealth government says differently, which is we won't allow you to have some of your family tax benefits and some other tax breaks, childcare assistance money, if you don't prove that your child is fully up to date with the vaccine schedule. That's a Commonwealth law, which, and I've introduced a bill in the federal parliament, to reintroduce a similar model into the Australian tax system, which allows conscientious objection at federal level as well. I mean, my view is, for what it's worth, is at a very basic level, it is totally illiberal to have a situation where the government takes 50% of your money. That's at first instance, not including the clips that the various levels of government take on the way through, leaving you with about 10.5 cents in your pocket on the way through. But we'll give you a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of that back if you do what we say with your children by vaccinating them. It doesn't matter what your views are, whether you've got very legitimate views, whether you just don't want to, you've got religious views, as John says, or whatever. We're going to make you do it or you don't get your money back. What is that? That doesn't, so if we live in a society where the government tells you what to do with your children, then it's very hard to mount a case that the parental structure is still the paramount institution in this country. These laws have got to go. They have to go at state and federal level. And it's about returning the autonomy back to parents as much as anything else, and giving people the opportunity to make their own minds up. So we'll be doing that as well. Once again, very similar, difficult environment in the federal parliament. No appetite for it, I can promise you that. But you know, you can only put these things up. Gives you an opportunity to talk about them. Gives you an opportunity to discuss them. And so, you know, I commend you for doing that. That's a really good thing.
Johnny Lada, before I throw to you, I just want to make it known to everybody that joining our crew has been Tanya Dannock, who was Russell Broadbent's former chief of staff. Tanya's done great work, and she drafted some magnificent letters inviting several people onto this program. Angus Taylor, leader of the Liberal Party, Mark Butler, Australia's Health Minister for Labor, Anthony Albanese, of course, was invited, and we also invited Tony Abbott, former Liberal Prime Minister. None of them responded to us. And so we've given them the opportunity to come onto this program and perhaps interact with Senator Johnson. They've chosen not to do that, but we do welcome them at any stage if they want to come and talk to us at Bullseye. Sorry, John, go ahead, mate.
Well, I think just leading on from that, Hoodie, I mean, it strikes me as very odd that in the instance of former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, I mean, I sent him a personal text inviting him on and he didn't even respond. I mean, when the Liberal Party is hemorrhaging membership, it strikes me as very odd that he wouldn't come on the inaugural show to try and win back some of those voters from One Nation. But anyway, that's just my helicopter view of that. But on the COVID stuff, it's interesting, isn't it, John Ruddick? I mean, you've been absolutely staunch in fighting for workers to go back. I mean, we've still got the police in New South Wales, majority of healthcare still out. I mean, there's corrective services. I mean, the list goes on. There's so many people that are still out of work. Justin Paul, you know, former State of Origin footballer that was sacked from the police for corruption, for not having the jab. I mean, we are hopeful that these guys are going to go back to work shortly, John, but I mean, it's been an absolute nightmare, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. No, well, we had budget estimates in February, March this year, and the police commissioner, the new guy, good guy, better than the previous one, he basically, you know, I said to him, I said, look, would you be prepared? He initially said he was not going to reopen this matter of re-employing the COVID cops. But then I asked him, you know, while the cameras are rolling, I said, well, would you be prepared to meet with some of these families, some of these former cops who want their job back? And most of the cops that were smart enough not to take the vax have moved on. They don't want to go back to the cops. They've done something else where they're happy. Okay, good. Okay, but about 50 of them really do want their job back because they love being a copper. And I'm thinking, okay, if you love being a copper that much, you're probably a really, really good copper. Now, you've been following it closely, Johnny Lada, okay. Now, that was 4 or 5 months ago when he went on Ben Fordham. The police commissioner went on Ben Fordham and said, yeah, we're looking at reinstating these COVID cops. We've got a little team looking into it. Okay, great. Has a meeting with me and another member of the upper house here, Rod Roberts, who's been good on this issue. He says, yeah, now we're all heading in the right direction. Now, putting aside everything to do with the vax and COVID and all that crap, what about this bureaucracy? You know, there's still, and so these coppers, like Justin Paul you mentioned, they listen to the police commissioner on 2GB, the big Ben Fordham show. They hear him say, oh, yeah, we're heading in this right direction. Gee, yeah, it's not like we're trying to raise the Titanic here. It's not the most complicated thing in the world. There might be a little bit of paperwork, but no, it just has to drag on and on and on and on and on. So all these people, it's not just the 50 coppers. Most of them have got kids and wives and everything else, and they're all on the edge of their seats. Yeah, and it's just inhumane bureaucracy. And I'll tell you, the disappointing thing with Senator Johnson is, you know, we really can't ask for a better environment at the moment now with Robert F. Kennedy as their health secretary. I mean, you know, wasn't he magnificent during COVID itself, you know? And, you know, I always loved Trump, but when RFK got into the race, I thought, you know, if I was an American, I'd vote for him. But anyway, so he's the boss. You know, he's like the bureaucratic boss. He's good mates with Trump. But why aren't we making progress? Well, they're making some progress, but it sounds as tough, doesn't it? What Rod Johnson's got to put up with sounds like he's fighting at every inch, an uphill battle. And I'm thinking, okay, even with RFK up on top, still a battle. Why is this? Because Do you know who really runs the government? It's not the politicians, they're just the show ponies out in front. It's the senior bureaucrats whose names we just don't know. These are people who don't want to be that public. They do want the power of the bureaucracy. And so that's the big, massive challenge that we've got.
Look, in those Senate hearings we talked about, where I was present with Senator Johnson in Washington a month ago, Senator Blumenthal, who's the Democratic counterpart to him in the ranking member in the hearings, he wasn't even present in the chamber when his witnesses were giving evidence. He spent about 5 minutes in the chamber, if he was lucky. He wasn't the slightest bit interested in the evidence that was presented by an amazing panel of doctors, including Angus Dalgleish and Asim Malhotra. But Senator Alex Antic, I want to ask you a question. Excuse me. In December last year, you asked the TGA about 6 deaths in children, and this occurred in the first year of the rollout for children in 2022. The median interval between vaccination and death was 4.5 days. However, the TGA failed to convene the Vaccine Safety Investigation Group to investigate any of them. Then in 2024, a few months before the pharmacovigilance report for 2022 was published, the recommendation for healthy children to receive the vaccine was changed, and it was no longer recommended as it was not a favourable risk-benefit ratio. Were you surprised by any of this?
Well, look, I mean, Hoodie, it sort of all melds into, into one a little bit of the questions and answers that we get. They're always, sort of round around the mulberry bush a little bit. So, look, I think I'm just struggling to remember that exact interaction. But I've asked a lot of questions about death. There was the tragic case of a 7 and I think a 10-year-old many years before who died, within close proximity. Look, I mean, the problem we have with our Senate estimates hearings, and I'm sure John could relay a similar experience, is that they sort of give the impression that you're getting a lot of time to sort of pick through the evidence and cross-examine and all this sort of stuff. But really, you're getting about 5 or 6 minutes. So it's very hard to get concise answers outside a proper hearing. So in a courtroom, for example, you'd have the opportunity to just say, well, wait a minute, stop, just let's go back to that. And, if you needed to spend an entire day picking through that one question, you could do it. We just don't have that in those routine Senate estimates hearings. And frankly, that's not what they're for. They're not there for, giving everything. They're there to pick through the budget line. So that's, once again, these are the sort of issues which need a proper, fulsome Royal Commission. I mean, a Royal Commission into COVID could go for years. I mean, it really literally could, picking on various issues and going through the information. So, look, I mean, I don't know. We've asked questions, we've continued to ask questions, and the answers are not always satisfactory. But, as I said, it's a bit like putting up a private senator's bill. You may not have much hope of getting it through, even one house of parliament, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't keep trying. So we'll keep asking the questions.
Senator Antic, can you give us some sort of insight into the layers of bureaucracy? I mean, it was clear from Senator Johnson's responses there that he's clearly frustrated. I mean, and as John's pointed out, I mean, you've got essentially the hierarchy from the top down that could actually do something, but these impediments, the bureaucracy, are just outrageous. I mean, Pip Spence, the head of CASA, she's just been reappointed for another 2 years. I mean, why on God's earth you'd appoint her to anything is beyond belief. But here we go. They just do these appointments, and the layers of these people that are essentially not answering your questions, shuffling paper around the place on big money.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think just broadly on the topic of bureaucracy, look, government's never been bigger. I mean, the rates of public servants in the ACT have skyrocketed. There's an interesting little sub-point to that. When I'm driving around Canberra, looking around, I see construction, apartments going up and all sorts of things. And I keep saying to people, well, who's coming here? Like, what do you like? What is the business that's running here? Sort of almost cynically. And of course, it's not. They're building, apartments for bureaucrats coming in, and so the size of government is growing. You can see it everywhere. It's a very strange place, Canberra, because particularly in inner city Canberra, it's around the parliamentary circle. There are some very, very elaborate, very expensive homes, all very much built in a similar style. This kind of, I would say, new left brutalist sort of style in many cases, but very, expensive. And where's the money coming from? Well, it's coming from publicly funded bureaucrats who are earning good money. So it's on display during Senate estimates. I mean, that is the moment. I think it really is quite, telling when you are from the outside world, and I'm probably not anymore, 6-7 years now, but coming into Canberra, seeing the bureaucrats descend on the building during the Senate estimates processes, it really gives you a fairly good idea of who's running the show, I've got to say. I mean, the old episodes of Yes Minister come to mind, but I think it's getting more and more layered, and I think there are more and more of them, and it is very hard to pierce that bubble. I mean, what I find with Senate estimates is if you have a question or a line of questioning that they're not ready for, then you tend to get a different set of answers for something that's topical, where there's clearly been weeks, if not longer, of preparation, which can only come through having many, many hands on deck. It is a top-heavy environment, and a very difficult environment for ministers to navigate through, even good ones who might want to do the good thing. So I can only imagine what it's like in Washington with Kennedy and Trump. I mean, it's and of course the other thing about it here now is I often say I'm not sure that the political class in this country aren't now third in line in terms of overall influence. The super funds and private equity, I think, now almost have as much say as the bureaucracy does, and the political class, I think, are almost further downstream these days. You can see it play out. Whatever the issue is, digital ID is an example. There was never any doubt that was going to pass. It was guillotined through, but it was clearly something that the big end of town wanted, and I'm not sure it would have mattered what the politicians said, honestly. I mean, I think it was just going to get bulldozed through. So, it's a worrying trend. Not a new one, but it's certainly growing, I think.
Hey, Alex, with the new makeup of the South Australian Legislative Council, where your good friend Mr. Bernard is, fairly senior person there now, they did just recently get a ban on late-term abortions through that upper house, which is pretty good. And Corey Bernardi, from the very, very beginning of COVID, was very good. A lot of people came on later on, but when it took guts right at the beginning, he was saying, look, I think this is a bit overblown. So do you think, it's your home state, do you think that there could be some type of a pretty serious COVID inquiry coming out of the South Australian Parliament anytime soon?
Yeah, well, the makeup's changed, that's for sure. And one of the things I would say about that is, John, is you're right. Corey was a great, strong voice when he was out of politics. He also was when he was in, but certainly on the issue of COVID when he wasn't, he was excellent. And the state parliament here has changed a lot, the makeup of it. There are two things that have happened to the state parliament. Well, one thing is we've done a lot of work inside the Liberal Party to make sure that the people that are going through to the upper house in the state parliament from the Liberal Party are strong Conservatives, which is the one thing. That's the first thing that happened, and that's been happening for a period of 5 years. The second thing, of course, is the last election where there were One Nation MLCs, 3 of them, I think, elected. So the makeup has changed dramatically. And yes, you're right. There was a bill put up by Sarah Game, who was former One Nation, now Family First MLC, to wind back the late-term abortion laws, and they did. They passed just, and they got into the lower house, which I think was very uncomfortable for the Labor government, who had forever, I think, rested on the knowledge that those sort of bills won't make it to the lower house. So, I mean, I flippantly said that it doesn't matter what the political class say before, when private equity and the big end of town want things. But of course, that's not actually true. I mean, it's just you have to get the right people in Parliament, which we've been trying to do for a long period of time. And it gives people a little bit of hope. I mean, I think, whatever the political persuasion is, if we get the right people into those positions, then anything can happen. And I think it's never been more important. For me, COVID was there were two things. It was actually the passage of the late-term abortion bill in South Australia in 2020, but also then COVID on the top of that, which showed me that the system really needed work. It wasn't working. People had to get back involved. We had to take politics away from this kind of listless political class that were just doing, rubber stamping things and moving on. And never was that seen more effectively than the Parliament, and it was a Liberal government, by the way, but the Parliament in South Australia just gifting all of those powers to the bureaucracy here. I mean, it was just, on any measure, it was just not the right thing to do. Hostile environment with COVID, I get it, but we pay our parliamentarians to make decisions and not to handball it when the tough times come. So it's been a long journey. We're getting there, but I think that's a long answer. The answer to your question is, look, maybe. I think there is now the prospect of doing that. Once again, it's got to get through the lower house though, and that's going to be a problem, I think, for a COVID inquiry.
Yeah, I'd like to pose another question to you, Alex. We saw it was the Chief Medical Officer of the Victorian State Government, Brett Sutton, came out in a press conference. He was questioned by, I think, an ABC journalist who asked him how come, state parliamentarians and politicians and bureaucrats were exempt from being vaccinated by COVID with the COVID vaccine. His response was, oh, well, they have certain legal exemptions that preclude them from having to take it, which was an argument mounted by so many people, like Johnny Larder, myself, others in different roles. And why were federal parliamentarians and judges and the fat cat bureaucrats in Canberra not mandated in order to keep their jobs?
Well, I'm not sure about the bureaucrats. I don't know. I just can't recall what the situation was there. I know that there was a standoff, wasn't there, in New South Wales Parliament, was it? Or was it about vaccination status at some point along the line?
The Victorian Parliament.
Victorian Parliament, sorry, yeah. So there was you're right, that's true. In the case of the federal Parliament, look, it was never mandated. And why that is, I don't know. I mean, it just never was. In each case, all of the mandates were largely, not all of them, but a lot of the public service mandates were, functions of statutory interpretation. Like they were powers that were gifted to the police commissioners and health CHOs to make those mandates. So they did, sadly, for the nurses and the fireys and the police, which was always outrageous. But in the case of parliamentarians, they never did. I mean, I think there are some arguments about denying parliamentarians access to Parliament on those grounds, which were never tested. And I suspect in the case of federal Parliament, I mean, it was a Liberal government at that stage, I suspect they didn't want to test those and have that fight. But look, I mean, some were, some weren't. I mean, there were private businesses that had people that didn't do that as well. So it was just luck of the draw. I mean, that was part of the reason why I became so... interested and active in that space was I was completely and utterly outraged that we were allowing a system that told people what to do and made them, force them into that position, and then continued this sort of myth that no one was ever forced. I mean, they were saying that after the event, no one was ever forced unless you wanted to keep your job and earn a living. I mean, it was just an intellectual falsehood. So yeah, I mean, I looked at the answer. That's a long answer. The answer is I don't know. It was never legislated. It was never used, and I don't think there was any grand conspiracy as far as I'm aware. There, it just never did.
I don't think there was legislation to actually support it at the federal level, and hence, and that's probably one of the things that really should come out of a COVID Royal Commission is the powers that were given to the individual health ministers, like in the case of New South Wales, Brad Hazzard, where he was able to essentially create legislation that was in place for 3 months that didn't require any other politicians or any upper house involvement to check as to whether that was fair or reasonable, because in his situation, he had the ability to determine whether there was a public health risk, and he decided there was one, so that was automatically enacted. And I think that's why you saw Scott Morrison at the time leaning on captains of industry like Alan Joyce to actually do the dirty work of the government, because they didn't want to be seen to be mandating. In fact, that was Morrison's line the whole way through. Oh, we're not mandating vaccines. And I'm sure there probably wasn't the legislation federally to support that. So I think that's one of the areas out of a Royal Commission that really needs to be looked at, is the legislation going forward into any further pandemics. Is that your understanding of it, John?
Well, look, sorry, I was just being distracted then, John, to be honest. So could you remind me what the question was? Sorry, I just had a thing come through.
No, I'm just on the back of what Alex was answering there in relation to the parliamentarians not being.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, Brad Hazzard and the same in other states was given out of the ordinary powers, one-off powers, to essentially create legislation that nobody in the upper house, no other politician could essentially vet. And this is a real issue going forward, and that's why Morrison, essentially lent on people like Alan Joyce, because he didn't have the powers to mandate, and so he basically, Michael McCormack as the deputy prime minister. I spoke to him about it, and he said, I said, well, why did this? And he said, well, John, he said, I had the chief of defence in my office, I had the chief health officer, I had the chief of somewhere else telling me that if we don't act, we're all going to die. So what else was I supposed to do? This is the sort of stuff that was going on.
Yeah, well, our Westminster system, which is the best form of government in the world so far, is built on this idea of checks and balances. So we have a government and we have an opposition who are meant to hold the government to account. And we're also meant to have a media which is always meant to be sceptical of the government, always wanting to be talking truth to power. But what happened during COVID is there was no opposition, and the media basically were the worst of all. Okay, then you got the academics and everybody at the COPs and the universities and the big corporates and everything. So while we should be having robust debate about something as big as a 2-year friggin' lockdown and warp speed vaccines all but forced on us, so while we should be having, as much sort of alternative views as possible, the only alternative views were on social media, and they were. Every day you'd wake up on social media and another account has just been shut down. Okay, it was just happening all the time. I reckon COVID would have been 50% not as bad if Elon Musk had been running X at the beginning of it. So we had no checks and balances. And you know what I actually reckon. Bill Shorten in 2019, he ran on a very left-wing agenda. Now, he was right-wing Labor, and he always thought he's the new Bob Hawke, the new centrist guy, but his agenda was really, really, really left-wing, okay? And you know what the better thing for a country would have been? Because then 6 months after that election, that 2019 election where ScoMo won, COVID comes and hits us over the head. It would have been much better for this country if Bill Shorten won the 2019 election. Now, then he wouldn't have had time to implement his stupid agenda because he would have been tied up with COVID. And then Labor could have got blamed for it. And then the Liberals, you'd have to think, they would have had some opposition. They would have, probably quite a bit of opposition, okay? Whereas we had we had ScoMo in there, meant to be from the Freedom Party, the pro-liberty party, that's where the word liberal comes from, liberty. And so you got the socialists over there basically criticising ScoMo for not going far enough. You remember, it went on for months about, he hasn't got the vaccines in people's arms quick enough. Okay, so that's why we had a complete breakdown, because all the old standard checks and balances were just sort of all pushed aside. So your best friend in life, John Marder, Mr. Hazzard, they can basically get away with anything. They can get away with anything when there's no opposition. And in fact, the opposition's telling you to go harder. The corporate media is telling you to go harder. And the only little crazy people out there, the little crazy cookers out there, are the only ones offering any resistance, and they went and whacked them over the head anyway. So that's why a complete jerk like Brad Hazzard could just get away with whatever he wanted.
Oh, that's got Johnny all fired up. But Senator Antic, I know we've got to let you go, that you guys do have a big day ahead of you, as we do. Alex, I just want to ask you the basic question. There is a big shift going on in Australian political in the Australian political scene. The rise of One Nation is clearly, to most pundits, seen as happening because governments and other major political parties are failing to read the mood of the electorate. So it's kind of like this is a mechanism to shake the parliament up. People have lost faith in most institutions. I personally think it's great to see a shake-up happening. I think we desperately need to wake people up, and this may be the catalyst that does that. How do you see this playing out over the next couple of years, especially from a Liberal perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no doubt it's a shake-up, Hoodie, and I think the poll numbers now, are sort of entrenched a little bit. I said the other day on Sky that you have to be a bit careful with polling numbers because, of course, they ebb and flow, and where things go, nobody knows, as they say. So it will change. There will be, swings and roundabouts. But I think the reality here is that it is not right to say that this is a protest vote anymore. When you have a situation where the insurgent party is sort of polling more than the government, that is not a protest vote. That is a very clear, political movement. So the question then becomes, from my side of politics, is, well, what's caused that and why, and what are you going to do about it? I've had the view for the long period of time that Liberals and others shouldn't be shouting at One Nation. They should be working out why it is people have left. And, in the days where protest party votes were just that, small numbers, 4-5%, okay, well, there's always going to be that. But this is not that. So we're going to see a little bit out of it. I mean, the South Australian election was a very, very interesting dynamic. It showed that people are fed up, and there are now 5 Liberals in the lower house, I think, in South Australia here, and about 6 or so in the upper house. So that is a very small number for what is a major political party. I think we're going to see, a very sort of different environment in Victoria as well, and then we've got the federal election coming up as well. So it's we haven't seen this. I mean, we now have a sort of collective primary vote on the right of politics of something in the order of 49%. I don't think the electorate has changed very much. I think just their views on politics and who's going to serve them and who they believe is doing the best for them has changed. So we have to learn that lesson, and I don't think throwing rocks at One Nation is a very good idea. If it was the mid-'80s with the cola wars and Coke and Pepsi were going at each other, you wouldn't have Coke saying, well, I don't like Pepsi's logo or the colour. You would say, well, we're going to make a better product. And that's really the only answer that you can have.
That's a good analogy.
And I think if Angus Taylor had a brain, he'd put you on the front bench immediately, and they'd go up another few points.
Yeah, well, thanks, John. He's certainly got a brain. And Angus is a good guy, and he's doing a good job. I have to say that. I mean, I really do rate Angus, but it is a difficult environment, for any opposition leader, regardless. But turning the Titanic around, and is a really, really difficult job. And he gets it. He certainly, he's a true conservative, Angus, and he's going to do a good job. But it's, to use another analogy now, I think in sporting terms, if in AFL terms, it's time to kick long down the ground, not kind of chip it sideways. And I think we'll see more and more of that out of Angus over the next few months and years.
Well, if you happen to bump into him in the corridors, Senator Antic, please extend an invitation for him to come on the Bullseye. We'd love to have him on and give him a fair hearing. John Ruddick, Senator Alex Antic, we thank you so much for helping us through our first big episode of Bullseye. We hope this gets shared far and wide. It was a great interview. We thank you for this panel discussion, and we'll be right back with Johnny's Media Watch. Thanks for joining us.
Guys.
Well, g'day everyone, and welcome back to Bullseye and Johnny's new segment, Johnny's Media Watch. And I'd like to set the scene for what has been the last 5 years, the pandemic of the unvaccinated, and that's where we've been, unfortunately. Hopefully in the next episodes we can get a bit more comical, and I'd enjoy your input from home, and send in information that we can use on Media Watch where the media have done the wrong thing and told lies, and we'll expose it. So let's start here, and let's go back down memory lane, and we'll start off with Gladys Berejiklian, former Premier of New South Wales.
If you're not vaccinated, you will not have the freedom or the freedoms that vaccinated people have, even when we get to 80% double dose. And it won't only be government decision. A private business might choose only to welcome patrons who are vaccinated. An airline might say you can only fly with us if you're vaccinated. You know, we all have choices, and if it's your choice not to be vaccinated, well, that might mean you cannot participate in things that fully vaccinated people do.
And now to my old mate, Brad Hazard.
Clearly, we continue to see in the public arena messages coming out from some people who would describe themselves as anti-vaxxers and others who have, for various reasons, opposition to vaccination. Can I just stress that anti-vaxxers obviously live in another universe, and others who give messages that this virus isn't dangerous and don't get vaccinated clearly have no medical or scientific training. This virus is an extremely transmissible virus. It can kill you and it can kill your family.
COVID is a very serious disease. We are seeing more hospitalisations, more admissions to ICU, more people on ventilators. We have to stop the spread of COVID.
There is only one solution here, and that is to get vaccinated. Dismiss the ideas that aren't based in science or medicine or are propagated by anti-vaxxers who live in another universe. Book yourself in for a vaccination.
The vaccines are incredibly effective at preventing hospitalisation and death, and they are the way out. And yes, we haven't got enough vaccine at the moment, but we have got some vaccine which is accessible, and I would urge everyone to go forward for your second dose of AstraZeneca, or also your first dose, or if you're eligible for Pfizer, to take up that opportunity.
So please go and get vaccinated. Don't listen to some of these crazy messages that are coming out implying that this is not a dangerous virus. It's extremely dangerous.
You couldn't make it up, Johnny.
Dear, oh dear. Oh dear, what a shocker. And now on to Dominic Perrottet.
And we can see in our hospitals today, in our ICUs, we're close to 50%, which has always been around that point. Around 50% of people who are in ICU are unvaccinated. That is at a time when 95% of our population is vaccinated. So I often say the numbers don't lie, but the facts speak for themselves. Vaccination is key to keeping yourself, your friends and your family safe.
And now, straight from Russia, with his own bronze statue, Dan Andrews.
I'll give you an age breakdown, which I know is always of interest, and it just confirms that this really is a pandemic now of the unvaccinated. 216 of our cases are aged 0 to 9, 232 are aged 10 to 19, 348 are aged in their 20s, and 245 are aged in their 30s. Of the new cases today, 91% are under 50. There are 89 people in hospital, and we send our best wishes to each and every one of them and their families, and of course to the teams of dedicated professionals who are caring for them. There are 24 people that are in ICU and 13 are on a ventilator. Only one person that's in hospital has been fully vaccinated. Again, just making the point that if you are double dose protected with either of the vaccines that are available, then you are almost certain to avoid very serious illness.
Now, I want to make the point here. We've heard very clearly that you're mad if you didn't get the vaccine, and if you didn't get it, you were likely to basically end up with death or injury from COVID. And so let us look at the facts now. We've got a clinical safety notice here from the New South Wales Health Department, New South Wales Ambulance. Now, the clinical safety notice is only put out by them in very rare circumstances in relation to very serious events. Now, I think there should be a lot more investigation, and there certainly should be a spotlight or a bullseye in our case put onto this document, because what it actually demonstrates is that they knew before they mandated for New South Wales health workers that this product, Pfizer in this instance, was causing heart problems in young males. And they documented it and sent it out to all the paramedics in New South Wales to look out for these circumstances. Now, let us have a look at this. We've heard about it being a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Now, let's look at the real stats. And I'll bring you in here, Hoodie. This is an outrage, really. This is New South Wales Health's own data. Now, they stopped issuing this data after the social media outcry about it. Now, if we look very closely, this is New South Wales Health's very own data, and what it says is those that have had vaccine are more likely to end up in hospital and more likely to end up in the intensive care. Now, we've got people that have had 4 or more doses, 810 in hospital, 58 are in intensive care, and in the case of the unvaccinated, 0. Not one person in hospital, not one. So the data is absolutely clear in this slide that was put out by New South Wales Health, Woody. So it was never a pandemic of the unvaccinated. It was a pandemic of the vaccinated. This whole thing has just been a complete lie. And I think that's why this first segment of Media Watch is just so important to set that out as the platform going forward so that people have an understanding, Hoodie, of just why we're fighting.
Oh, look, absolutely, John. And as I said in our panel discussion, I watched a James Corbett documentary last night on Bill Gates, and there was clear evidence in that documentary that not only were the vaccines not safe or effective, and they didn't stop the spread. In actual fact, people who were vaccinated were more likely to get COVID, serious COVID, than those who weren't. So the data's out there. And what's really interesting, Johnny, is that back then, when all those clips were coming out and we were sitting through the daily press conferences, when they were questioned about any of the stuff we were mentioning at the time, and we were relaying from people like Professor Harvey Risch, Asim Malhotra, Angus Dalgleish, the list goes on, Pierre Corey, Paul Marrick, some of the best in the world were saying, stop it, stop it, stop it. The data is in now. We know that this is going to cause extreme harm and death. Stop the vaccine. They totally ignored it. They didn't. When the data was presented, they didn't want to know about it. They only want data to support their claims, and Senator Johnson made that very clear. When the VAERS data in America was showing incidents of extreme harm by the vaccines, they changed the algorithms so that the VAERS data wouldn't reflect the fact. Mate, it's compelling.
It is compelling. Well, anyway, it's probably not our funniest blooper roll, but I just think, it's a very solemn time, and I think it's very important for anyone that's new out there watching that may not put the pieces together in the puzzle yet, just to see what actually went on. And it's there'll be more to come, and we'll have a bit of fun with this. And I encourage everyone to send in anything that might be worth exposing on Johnny's Media Watch. So you just couldn't make this stuff up.
You couldn't make this stuff up, and we want to thank you all for being part of our first ever Bullseye program. We want to thank Rob McKnight for producing it. He's done a great job. We want to thank Tanya Danik for supporting in so many ways. Also Suzanne Burns and Stuart Robertson for getting all this material out there. We couldn't do it without you. They're a great team of volunteers, and we really appreciate them. As always, I say a little prayer at the end, so allow me. Lord Father in heaven, we just want to bathe in the light of your truth. So guide and lead us, and have this message that we're sharing today spread far and wide to open the ears and minds of people who need to hear it. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Don't forget, Australia, what you did yesterday got you to today, and we see you next time for episode 2 of Bullseye. Thanks for joining us.